Welcome to Design Stand-Up, episode 31, Why We Unfairly Judge Other Designers, and Staying in Touch with What Users Want, by Karkov of speckyboy. And I'm Ryan Stone, your host and fellow UX designer. Welcome to the show, if it's your first time listening. Here at Design Stand-Up, I'm partnering with top blogs in the design industry to read you well-crafted articles from the best in the biz. My goal is to help you learn about design on the go, so you can spend less time staring at a screen and more time doing what you love. Today, Eric of speckyboy describes why we often judge our fellow designers unfairly, and 4 ways to consistently design with your users in mind. So without further ado, let's stand up. Why We Unfairly Judge Other Designers, by Eric Karkov of speckyboy. We humans are quite adept at quickly assessing whatever happens to be in front of us. I'm sure it has something to do with that ancient fight-or-flight response. You know, the one that tells us to run from the pack of wolves and fight for that last donut. But in modern times, those fast judgments aren't always a good thing. It can even be costly. Think of a person you see who looks a little bit different from you. They could be the nicest person you'd ever meet, but judging them by looks alone could cost you the chance to ever find that out. In design circles, we're just as quick to judge others in our profession. It's incredibly easy to glance at another's work and call it crap. But are we judging fairly? The great unknowns. When we see another designer's work, we either like it or not. That's fair enough. But have you ever thought that you could do it better? One of the more amusing examples of this is when a new operating system is released. You'll find designers out there complaining about various aspects of what has been done. There may even be some who decide to create their own, better versions of the real thing. And while it's possible that you could have built that whole OS, website, mobile app better, there's still so many unknowns regarding the story behind the design. Unknown number 1, client restrictions. We don't know the limitations placed on the designers. Client needs, wants, and opinions can be a huge factor in determining the final outcome. Plus, the allotted budget and timeline can also be limiting. Unknown number 2, project goals. Along with the whims of a client are the actual goals of the project. Specific goals often mean that designers have to dedicate more time to associated elements. That may mean less time is allocated to the things that we designers may tend to notice more than the general public. And unknown number 3, designer experience and expertise. Short of knowing someone on a personal level, we may never know where a designer is in their respective career. We don't know their experiences or their specialties. For example, I'm a completely self-taught designer and developer. Therefore, the design choices I make may be quite different from someone who did go to school for these skills. The point is that, while we can offer criticism of someone else's hard work, we don't really know the whole story. It's possible that those involved really did the best they could, given the circumstances, or perhaps they failed miserably. Either way, it's wise to take a moment and consider the factors that may have affected the outcome. You might even consider it a learning experience. Competitive spirit. Another important factor in the unfair judgment of other designers is the element of competition. This seems to especially pop up whenever we, 1, are looking at portfolios from local designers or those within our niche, number 2, taking over a website from another designer, or number 3, another designer is taking over a website from us. We can be quick to judge in these situations, partly out of insecurity and perhaps a bit of ego as well. Web design is a very saturated industry, and it's natural to want to stand out. It makes sense that we would want to compare ourselves favorably to others in these cases. I've seen this in my own behavior. There have been instances where, after inheriting an existing site, a client will rip into the previous designer in a conversation with me. I found myself joining in, even though I knew nothing about them or their challenges. It's also happened in the reverse situation of losing a site to someone else. When the site's redesign was released, I was less than classy about it, at least in my own inner monologue. As time has gone on, I thankfully find myself doing this less and less. Sure, I may quibble with how a particular feature was built and how it's going to make my day more difficult if I have to work with it, but petty judgments are fading away. Why it's harmful. My experience has been that it's just best to stay away from this type of behavior. On the surface, it may seem innocuous, especially if you're not making remarks to anyone about it, but there are several reasons to avoid it. 1, it's a waste of time. If we have enough time to pick apart someone else, we must be doing something wrong. There simply has to be more productive ways to spend a few free minutes. 2, it can hamper personal growth. None of us knows everything there is to know about design. By making dismissive judgments about others, we're acting as though we are an authority on the subject, but we all have things we've yet to learn. Arrogance is a roadblock on the way to self-improvement. And number 3, it goes against the spirit of the design community. As a community, we are all about sharing knowledge and helping fellow designers to improve. Trashing someone else's work just seems to be the antithesis of that unofficial credo. The bottom line is that nothing good can come out of the practice, so why bother? The choice is ours. Design is something that should always be open to criticism, but there is a stark difference between viewing someone else's work in a constructive or destructive fashion. In a constructive sense, we can take from what others have done and potentially learn from it. It's an opportunity to compare and contrast our own style to that of another professional. Choosing a destructive form of critique is more about attempting to lift ourselves up at the expense of someone else. Even if the other person doesn't know about it, there's still a cost. It comes in the form of taking ourselves out of the right frame of mind. The great thing is that we all have a choice in the matter. Hopefully, we'll make the right one. Staying in touch with what users want, by Eric Karkov of speckyboy. As web designers, we build sites for our clients based on our own expertise. And while there are tried and true techniques for placing items such as navigation and calls to action, other design decisions are more arbitrary. We often end up implementing features the way we think users will want them to be. While this is challenging for all designers, it's especially so for solo freelancers and small agencies. Why? Because we often don't have the budget to conduct real user testing. If you work on a lot of smaller projects, you might have to venture an educated guess or two when it comes to building a great UX. That can lead to some underperforming features. Plus, there can also be times when our ego gets in the way. The more experience and success you attain as a designer, the easier it is to think that you know it all. This too can result in being out of step with what everyday users expect. It's not so ironic that I place myself in both of the above groups. Much of my career has been spent working with smaller clients who generally don't budget for any extras. And there was a time when I thought I really did have it all figured out. Turns out I didn't. As such, I tried to keep an open mind when it comes to the usability of my work. Here are a few things I've learned and continue to learn about designing with users in mind. Always choose the simplest path. It's easy to get carried away with design. Sometimes we implement features because they're part of a hot new trend or they help us show off our great skills. It's also quite possible to, no matter how noble our intention, completely overthink the design process. I think it's a common occurrence to start off with a basic idea that, on its own, works well enough. But then we start layering on effects in an effort to make things perfect in our eyes. What we don't realize at the time is that we may actually be making this feature harder for users to digest. For example, tweaking text colors until they look amazing could inadvertently degrade accessibility, or a slick animation in a navigation bar might cause chaos for those using an older browser. Then there is that quest to preserve whitespace, sometimes at the expense of hiding important information. Even talented designers are capable of taking a good thing and wrecking it. Therefore, it's worthwhile to keep simplicity in mind. Fancy effects are great, but they should only be used if they actually enhance the user experience. In other words, they call attention to the right things. The key is in thinking about what it is we want our user to do. What actions do we expect them to take? From there, it's about creating something that makes caring about those actions as obvious and painless as possible. Get clients on board. User-centric design doesn't always come easily. Sometimes you have to fight for it, or at least plead your case. Clients have been known to share their honest opinions about the designs we create for them. The trouble is that they, like us, are prone to having the wrong priorities. We've all had experiences where a client insists on a feature being implemented in a certain way or with a specific placement. Sometimes they hit the nail right on the head. Other times, the result is something that pleases them, yet makes the site more difficult to use. The easiest thing is to defer to your client in this situation, but it's not the right thing. This is where you'll need to use your expert voice in a friendly way. Explain your concerns as to why you would recommend doing something differently. For example, if the goal of the website is to get users to contact your client, show them the barriers that are getting in the way. Perhaps the call to action isn't obvious enough, or maybe contact information is too hard to find. Quite often, clients don't see things through the eyes of their everyday user. But once they do, they are usually willing to do whatever it takes to increase usability. It's just a matter of speaking up when you need to. Consider your own user experience. Odds are that you've encountered plenty of good and bad experiences as a user. Just think about the websites you routinely visit, at least the ones you didn't have a hand in building. How easy are they to use? What are the pain points that drive you crazy? Each site, app, or even operating system that you use can serve as a reference point. You can look back at them and say, I love how that works, or that made no sense at all. That can and should play a role in your own projects. For instance, one of my biggest frustrations is a banking site I visit at tax time. Once logged in, it doesn't provide a clear path to the particular documents I need to access. I have to click around to various seemingly unrelated pages before I can find what I'm looking for. While I generally don't design for banks, I do work on membership sites. This poor UX reminds me to make account information easier to find. Of course, as professionals, we won't necessarily see the web the same way others do, but we can still apply our unique experiences in an effort to do better. Learn and evolve. Regardless of whether or not we have access to detailed user testing, it's still possible to improve the usability of our work. Some of it is plain common sense, but it's also about being in the right frame of mind when putting a site together. The concept of progressive enhancement should always be at the forefront of what we're doing. That might mean sacrificing a fancy portfolio-enhancing effect in exchange for a feature that is easier to use. So be it. That's what we're paid to do. And even if we can't perform formal testing, that doesn't mean we still can't ask a client, friend, or colleague for an honest opinion. While this doesn't provide the same depth of feedback, it is useful all the same. Afterwards, we can analyze the results and see how effective our decisions have been. We'll still make mistakes. Even resource-rich companies are far from perfect. The important thing is that we learn from them and always strive for improvement. You just listened to the post titled, Why We Unfairly Judge Other Designers, and Staying in Touch with What Users Want by Eric Karkovac of speckyboy. If you want to learn more about Eric and read some of his other amazing design articles, just press the link in the show notes or head over to speckyboy at speckyboy.com. Oh, and hey, do you like free stickers? I just got an order of 50 fresh new stickers from Sticker Mule, and I'll tell you what, if you head over to iTunes or Google Podcasts right now and leave a short rating or review, I will send you some awesome Design Stand-Up sticker swag on the house. Well, that's all I have for you today, guys. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, fill up those coffees, turn up those tunes, and let's design a better world.